Hi everyone. This PowerPoint will review the information we did not have a chance to cover last week in class on the chemical senses, that is smell and taste, and the so-called senses of the skin, touch and also pain. First of these is the sense of smell, and smell is the stimuli for smell are chemical substances known by psychologists as odorants, and these odorants bind with receptors in the lining or epithelium of your nose, just like a lock and a key. We have approximately 1,000 different kinds of receptors. All of these are proteins, and each chemical odorant activates a different combination of those receptors, and it's these different combinations that allow us to detect up to 10,000 different odors. If this looks a little bit like neurotransmission, that is no accident. The receptors for smell, the protein sensors that are in the epithelium of the nose, are structurally very similar to the protein receptors that detect the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine. Smell is a very old sense, and its neuroanatomy is just a little bit different from our other senses as a consequence. The neurons that carry information from the odorant receptors in the nose, they synapse in a structure known as the olfactory bulb, and neurons from the olfactory bulb carry information about smell to the amygdala, and because they are instead of the thalamus. This allows the animal or the person to react to smells without any kind of conscious intervention or interpretation. And the particular part of the amygdala that is responsible for responding to smell is the so-called corticomedial amygdala. Information from this amygdala is then about smell is then also forwarded to parts of the cerebral cortex, specifically the piriform cortex and the orbital gyrus. But this is the only sense that circumvents the thalamus on its way to the cortex. The other chemical sense is taste, and the receptors for taste are located in the taste buds, which are themselves housed in the little bumps on your tongue known as papillae. We have about 2,000 to 10,000 taste buds. The number that you have is genetically determined, and therefore some people have a more acute sense of taste than others. The sense of taste does follow that common architecture. And so from the sensory receptors in the taste buds on the tongue, which detect 5 different primary tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, and salty, as well as one you may not recognize from high school health class called umami. And this particular taste refers to the savory taste of foods that have a lot of protein in them. The information from the taste buds goes, first of all, now makes some synapses down here in the brainstem, but then ends up in the thalamus, and the part of the thalamus that is responsible for redirecting taste information is called the ventral posterior medial nucleus, and it sends taste information here to the parietal cortex where it is interpreted. Take a look at these foods, and on a scale of 1 to 10, would you run for cover if this appeared on the dinner table in the evening? If so, give that food a number 1. If you love it and you would be absolutely delighted to have that served for dinner tonight, give it a number 5. And here are the foods: broccoli, coffee, Brussels sprouts, grapefruit juice, green tea, cabbage, soy, tonic water. Most people like some, don't like some. But some people truly detest all of these foods. And if you are one of those people, you are a so-called super taster. And the reason why these foods taste especially bitter to you is that you have, first of all, you have more of a particular kind of papillae. They're called fungiform because if you were able to look at them close up with some magnification, they would look like little mushrooms. And you also have a particular form of the gene for the taste receptor TAS2R38. And because you have that particular form, which is not, which is one of the rarer forms, that means that you taste these foods as exceptionally bitter. The senses of the skin are touch and pain, and touch is actually a complex sense that involves a number of different kinds of sensations, and each of them detected by a different kind of touch receptor in the skin. This diagram shows a cross-section through the skin, and it shows you where some of these different kinds of receptors are located relative to the skin surface. And here are a number of the touch receptors. The first two, the Pacinian corpuscle and the Meissner corpuscle, respond to different frequencies of vibration. And vibration is a sensation that you detect, for example, when you're holding your hair dryer, or if you put your hand on a running appliance with a running motor. While it's running, you feel it vibrate. But also it is the sensation that corresponds to running your hands over an uneven surface. For example, corduroy or rough sandpaper. And the different frequencies of that vibration are detected by different kinds of skin receptors. Both the Pacinian and Meissner corpuscles, the information from these receptors is carried to the spinal cord by a particular kind of axon called an A beta nerve fiber, and the A beta fibers are relatively large in diameter and they are heavily myelinated, which means that the information travels fairly quickly. Hair follicle receptors, as the name suggests, are located at the base of the hair follicles, and when you brush your arm against something and feel that sensation, that is the displacement of the hairs, which is detected by these hair follicle receptors. They are also, the information from them is conducted by A beta nerve fibers. And finally, the Ruffini corpuscle. This is the sensory receptor that responds to pressure, and it is also connected to an A beta nerve fiber. The different parts of the skin have different densities of receptors, and each receptor is responsible for a part of the skin called the sensory field, and those sensory fields also differ in size in different parts of the body. If you think back to the demo that we did with the 2-point discrimination and the fry hairs, you may recall that it was easier to detect these sensations or to determine that there were 2 points, different on the hand than on the arm, different on the face than on the arm. And the reason for that is that those parts of skin have where it's easier to detect the sensation, they have more receptors with smaller receptive fields. This diagram illustrates that phenomenon. It is called a homunculus, which means little man. And the reason why the parts of the body are distorted, the bigger the part of the body, the more touch receptors it has, and the smaller their receptive fields. Obviously, the hands are very sensitive. You may be a little surprised to see that among the most sensitive parts of the body, though, are the lips, tongue, areas surrounding the mouth, and that is because these areas are very important for speech. It helps you to determine that you are configuring your mouth in the correct way to make the sounds that you wish to make for the words that you're trying to use. The sense of touch follows the common architecture. The sensory receptors in the skin send information via the sensory neurons into the spinal cord, and they make their first synapse there in the spinal cord. There are a number of synapses then in the brainstem, but we end up once again in the thalamus, in this case in the ventral posterior nucleus. And this part of the thalamus directs that information to primary somatosensory cortex, which of course is located in the parietal lobe. The final kind of receptors for the skin senses are those that detect pain stimuli, and they have a special name, nociceptor. It comes from the Latin word for pain, and these are actually free nerve endings. The axons which carry the information about tissue injury, and that's really what pain is often related to or typically related to. They are very different from the touch receptors because they are much smaller in diameter, and they are either lightly myelinated, in which case they are called A delta, or they are unmyelinated, and those are called C fibers. The pain receptors detect mechanical pain. That's the kind of pain you feel if you drop a book on your foot or you pinch your finger in a door. They also detect thermal pain, that is heat or very cold substances, as well as chemical pain, which is the pain that is produced when you drop a corrosive substance on your skin. And they are located throughout the skin and also in your internal organs or viscera. Pain is actually important, and it serves a very useful evolutionary purpose. When you feel pain, that is a signal that something is wrong. You should probably get away from whatever is causing the pain. You should take care of yourself. You should go to a doctor. You should make sure that you cover the wound. And so pain helps us to react to an injury in a way that's going to ensure our survival. The type of pain that we are most familiar with is the kind of pain that accompanies injuries. It's called acute pain because it is associated with an acute injury or illness. In addition to injury, this is the kind of pain that is what you would feel after surgery, during childbirth. For example, if you were coming down with the flu and you had a headache and that achy feeling, that would be another example of acute pain. A common and very serious medical problem, however, is chronic pain. And chronic pain is pain that doesn't go away. In some cases, it's because you have an injury that has not healed correctly. For example, if you sprain your ankle and you don't get the proper kind of physical therapy or you don't support the ankle while it's healing, it may heal with adhesions, and those continue to cause pain. And then you may need some surgery, or you may need additional physical therapy in order to break up that scar tissue. Chronic illnesses are responsible for chronic pain. Things like multiple sclerosis, for example, or cancer, or some other kinds of, for example, heart disease, the condition known as angina, which signals the lack of oxygen to your heart. That is another kind of chronic pain. And chronic pain is important medically because it is the leading cause of disability in this country. It is also a reason why we have a lot of confusion about the use of prescription pain medications. There are definitely people who have serious medically legitimate pain that needs to be treated, but there are also individuals who are addicted to these substances, and it creates a real issue for the medical community determining which is which. One very important example of chronic pain that afflicts about 2 million Americans is called neuropathic pain. And neuropathic pain is interesting because it occurs after an injury has healed, and what has happened is that the neurons in the spinal cord and the brain have become sensitized. And as a result, they fire spontaneously, almost as if the person was having a seizure, but it was limited to the pain pathways. The diagram illustrates one cause of neuropathic pain, or one syndrome that is related to neuropathic pain. It's called trigeminal neuralgia, and it can follow in the wake of a dental problem or an injury to the jaw. It is exquisitely painful. And what happens if the person is touched or when they're eating or if the wind blows against their face, they feel an intense pain that is like an electric shock running through the skin and up into their head. This is neuropathic pain. The injury has healed, but the pain pathways continue to fire. Because neuropathic pain is not related to tissue injury, it doesn't respond to things like Advil or morphine. But because it is somewhat similar to seizures, some people do find relief with seizure medications. That's it for our discussion of sensation and perception. If there's anything that you don't understand, be sure to see me after class or during my office hours.